People say blood never stabs you in the back. They clearly have not met my brother. Standing in his bespoke suit, he told the jury I was a paranoid lunatic who must be stripped of our tech legacy. He thought bribing a corrupt judge would bury me for good. He had no idea dragging me to a Seattle court was signing his own empire's death warrant, because when I finally stated my real title, that judge's gavel never fell. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Maya Revenge Stories. I want to sincerely thank you all for your continuous support, but unfortunately, YouTube has completely demonetized our channel, leaving us with absolutely zero budget to operate, which means we are forced to stop uploading new videos here in the near future. Instead, we are transitioning our work entirely to Patreon. If you find today's story captivating, please support us by joining the Maya Revenge Stories Patreon channel to experience exclusive, true stories that are significantly better and longer, featuring highly detailed situations we simply cannot publish publicly on YouTube, all brought to life by multiple emotional voice actors in a single episode. You can join right now by scanning the Patreon QR code on your screen or by clicking the link in the description or the pinned comment of this video. Now, let us begin today's dark tale, centered around a woman named Carmen Bishop. The air conditioning inside the high-tech corporate courtroom in downtown Seattle was set to a freezing temperature, deliberately designed to make anyone on the defense table feel small, isolated, and entirely powerless. I sat there in total silence, wearing a plain, unbranded gray wool coat, looking every bit the pathetic victim they wanted me to be. Up at the witness stand, my older brother, Vance Bishop, was putting on the performance of a lifetime. Wearing a bespoke Italian suit that probably cost $10,000, he looked like the perfect picture of a Silicon Valley visionary. He spoke with a smooth, practiced baritone voice, dripping with fake sorrow, as he gestured toward me. "Just look at her, Your Honor," Vance said, his voice echoing off the polished mahogany walls. "She has not spoken a single word since this proceeding began. She sits there, completely vacant. It breaks my heart. But she is a shell of the sister I once knew. I was a master of the stage. But this was not a dispute over some petty family trust fund or a vacation home. The prize sitting on the table was Project Aegis. It was a revolutionary quantum security algorithm core, a digital fortress capable of protecting or destroying global financial networks. I wrote every single line of that core architecture. It was my mind, my sweat, my creation. But Vance, with his endless greed and corporate maneuvering, had stolen the patents and slapped his own name across my life's work while I was away. Now, to secure his theft, he was presenting a mountain of fabricated evidence to the court. His high-paid legal team handed the bailiff a thick stack of glossy medical files. According to those meticulously forged documents, I was a paranoid schizophrenic with a severe substance abuse problem. Vance stood under oath and swore that I had run away from home 8 years ago, spending nearly a decade wandering the streets, completely out of my mind. He painted a tragic picture of a drug-addicted runaway who had suddenly crawled back out of the gutter, possessing absolutely zero cognitive ability to understand basic reality, let alone manage a multi-billion-dollar tech enterprise. Sitting high above us on the bench, Judge Harrison eagerly soaked up every single lie. Harrison was a bloated, self-important man whose corrupt nature practically radiated from his tailored robes. He continuously nodded along to Vance's tragic tale, casting glances down at me filled with blatant disgust and unfiltered contempt. Whenever my court-appointed lawyer, a nervous junior attorney trembling in a cheap suit, attempted to intervene, Harrison shut him down with brutal efficiency. "Objection, Your Honor. These medical records have not been independently verified," my lawyer stammered. Judge Harrison slammed his wooden gavel down so hard it echoed like a gunshot. "Overruled, counselor. Sit down and keep quiet. I will not have you interrupting Mr. Bishop while he details this painful family tragedy." The bias was completely shameless. The entire room belonged to Vance. The gallery behind me was packed shoulder to shoulder with vulture venture capitalists, bought-off tech journalists, and media executives Vance had bribed to control the narrative. I could hear their relentless whispering. They were snickering, mocking my oversized coat, laughing at my messy hair, fully believing the illusion that I was a broken, crazy woman about to lose everything. The judge called for a brief 5-minute recess to review the fake medical documents. As the courtroom exhaled, Vance stepped down from the witness podium. He smoothed his expensive tie and walked deliberately past my table. He did not look at my lawyer. He leaned down, placing his manicured hands on the wooden table, bringing his face mere inches from mine. The mask of the grieving brother vanished instantly, replaced by a triumphant, malicious smirk. "Enjoy the air conditioning while it lasts, little sister," Vance whispered, his breath smelling of expensive espresso and sheer arrogance. "Because when the judge signs that order, you are going straight back to the gutter. You will be sleeping under a bridge tonight, and Aegis belongs to me." He straightened his jacket and walked away, expecting me to break down in tears, expecting me to scream or throw a desperate tantrum that would only prove his fake insanity claims. But I did not move a single muscle. My eyes remained dead and cold, betraying absolutely zero panic. I simply sat there, letting the heavy silence wrap around me like a shield, down inside the deep right pocket of my wool coat. My fingers gently traced the cold, hard edges of a small object. It was a military-grade, black encrypted flash drive. Vance thought he was the predator in this room, playing a brilliant game of chess. He had no idea I was not playing chess at all. The murmurs of the courtroom faded into a dull, meaningless drone as I stared straight ahead, my mind drifting far away from the freezing air of this corrupted room. Vance had always been the golden child of the family, even when we were young. He possessed a terrifying charm, a smooth-talking charisma that perfectly masked a profound, deep-seated incompetence. Our parents, especially our late father, looked at him and saw a brilliant business prodigy, a visionary who would take the family name to unprecedented global heights. They never saw the ugly reality behind closed doors. They never saw that every successful line of code, every flawless system architecture that built our early wealth, was typed exclusively by my hands. While Vance was out at exclusive country clubs, sipping expensive champagne and shaking hands with wealthy investors, I was locked down in the basement server room. I spent thousands upon thousands of hours in the dark, working 14 to 16 hours a day, my eyes burning from the harsh glare of multiple monitors, fueling his unearned rise to the top. I was the silent ghost in his machine, the invisible, bleeding foundation of his towering, fragile ego. His narrative on the witness stand today was a twisted masterpiece of absolute fiction. 8 years ago, I did not spiral into a devastating drug addiction. I did not pack a dirty canvas bag and vanish into the gritty, unforgiving underbelly of the city streets, as he so loudly claimed. The truth was far more complex and infinitely more dangerous than his tiny mind could ever comprehend. I was recruited. It happened on a freezing, rainy Tuesday evening. A woman in a sharp navy blue suit intercepted me as I left the underground laboratory. She handed me a highly secure, encrypted tablet and showed me classified data that made my blood run instantly cold. She was an operative from the Department of Tactical Corporate Oversight, universally known within the Black Ops community, simply as the DTCO. It is a top-secret, highly classified federal intelligence agency tasked with a single, brutal objective. They hunt down, infiltrate, and completely dismantle elite corporate cybercrimes that threaten national security. They had been secretly monitoring my independent work on quantum security protocols. They knew my mind could either be an impenetrable shield for the country or a devastating weapon for its enemies. They offered me a position, but it came with a staggering, devastating price: complete and utter erasure from my own life. Accepting the DTCO commission meant adhering to the absolute highest tier of national security clearance. I had to sever all ties instantly. There could be no farewell phone calls, no explanatory emails, no tearful goodbyes with my father. I just disappeared into the wind, and Vance, opportunistic and deeply ruthless, immediately filled that silent vacuum with his venom. From the shadows of secure, underground government facilities, I was forced to watch from afar as he completely rewrote my history. The hardest part of the last 8 years was not the grueling, brutal physical combat training. It was not the endless, coffee-fueled nights decrypting hostile foreign malware. The hardest part was my father. During the agonizing final 6 months of his life, as a vicious cancer ravaged his body, Vance sat by his hospital bedside every single day and whispered malicious lies directly into his ear. He told our dying father that I had stolen company money to buy street drugs, that I had abandoned the family out of spite, that I was a hopeless, psychotic failure who did not care about him. Because of my security clearance, I had covert access to the hospital room surveillance feeds through a secure military satellite link. I had to sit in a classified concrete bunker, staring at a screen, biting my own lip until the blood ran down my chin, watching my father cry over a daughter he truly believed had thrown her life into the gutter. I could not reach out. I could not send a simple message to comfort him. I had to let my father die believing that Vance was his only loyal, loving child. That sacrifice tore a hole in my soul that would never heal. Vance happily capitalized on my enforced, permanent silence to execute a total corporate takeover. With our father gone and me completely out of the picture, he systematically defrauded the minority shareholders out of millions of dollars. He restructured the entire board of directors, replacing everyone with his own spineless, loyal puppets. Then, he moved his greedy sights to the absolute crown jewel of our tech empire, Project Aegis. He did not just illegally steal my name off the patents. He fundamentally misunderstood the terrifying power of what I had actually built. Aegis was not just a strong commercial firewall. It was a master lock that could secure or completely destroy the entire digital infrastructure of the country. And Vance, blinded by an insatiable, reckless hunger for hundreds of millions of dollars, decided to sell it to the highest bidder. I honestly thought he was making a brilliant, untraceable corporate deal. But our intelligence network at the DTCO picked up his encrypted communication chatter exactly 6 months ago. Vance had secretly entered into negotiations to sell the Aegis algorithm to a foreign shell corporation based overseas. On paper, it looked like a legitimate, massively wealthy tech conglomerate. But DTCO intelligence quickly confirmed it was a heavily guarded, sophisticated front for an international cybercrime syndicate. These were the kind of people who actively destabilized foreign governments and paralyzed national power grids for fun. If that algorithm fell into their hands, they could bypass any military firewall on the planet within 48 hours. Vance was not just stealing my intellectual property anymore. He was actively, knowingly committing high treason. He was handing a fully loaded digital weapon to global terrorists in exchange for a massive offshore bank deposit. That is exactly why I came back. I did not return to this miserable courtroom in Seattle to fight for a pathetic slice of the family inheritance. I did not care about the money, the luxury houses, or the hollow corporate titles. I returned because my own flesh and blood had become a severe, immediate threat to national security. The director of the DTCO deployed me not as a grieving, wronged sister, but as a highly trained tactical operative on a strict seek and destroy mission. Vance stood there smiling, thinking he was burying me under the heavy weight of his fabricated legal documents. He had absolutely no idea that I was the Undertaker, and I had already dug his grave. The brief recess concluded with the heavy oak doors swinging shut, sealing us back inside the icy chamber. Vance's lead attorney, a slick corporate shark, radiating expensive cologne and ruthless ambition, swaggered up to the judge's bench. He held a single sheet of heavy parchment paper, presenting it as if it were a holy artifact. It was the final, lethal blow they had prepared, a meticulously forged power of attorney. The document claimed to carry the signature of our late father, dated exactly 4 days before his passing. The fraudulent ink strokes granted Vance the absolute, irrevocable right to liquidate, transfer, and sell every single asset related to Project Aegis. It was a masterpiece of legal fiction, designed to completely bypass any remaining shareholder protections. Judge Harrison took the fake document, adjusting his reading glasses with a theatrical display of careful consideration. He traced the forged signature with his index finger, nodding in profound agreement with the lies placed before him. He leaned forward, Bringing his mouth close to the silver microphone, his voice boomed through the speakers, dripping with a sickeningly righteous and pompous tone. After reviewing this final piece of evidence, the path forward is abundantly clear, Judge Harrison declared, looking out over the packed room. For the benefit of global technological advancement and the greater social progress of our digital economy, a revolutionary system like Aegis cannot be left paralyzed by family disputes. Therefore, I am prepared to sign an emergency executive order. This ruling will immediately and permanently strip the defendant of all inheritance rights, transferring full operational and financial control directly to Mr. Vance Bishop. A wave of excited whispers washed through the gallery. The corrupt tech journalists furiously typed on their laptops, ready to publish the breaking news. The venture capitalists in the back rows started pulling out their expensive smartphones, ready to text their offshore brokers that the massive sale was officially green-lit to seal his flawless victory. Vance stepped back up to the witness podium. He lowered his head, his shoulders trembling slightly as he pulled off the ultimate performance. He actually managed to produce a single, glistening tear that rolled down his perfectly groomed cheek. "Thank you, Your Honor," Vance said, his voice cracking with artificial emotion. "This is the hardest day of my life. I love her. I really do. But I'm only doing this to protect my sister from her own tragic madness. She needs severe psychiatric help, not a corporate empire." Beside me at the defense table, my appointed lawyer executed his own crucial role flawlessly. I had deliberately selected him not for his legal brilliance, but for his impeccable ability to play a defeated, helpless pawn, right on cue. He let out a heavy, defeated sigh. He dropped his ballpoint pen onto the wooden desk with a loud clatter. He slumped his shoulders, aggressively shoving his legal pads and files into a worn-out leather briefcase. He shook his head at the judge, physically broadcasting his complete and utter surrender. The entire courtroom watched him give up. In their minds, the gavel had already fallen. My fate was completely sealed, wrapped up neatly with the bow for Vance to sell to his criminal buyers. They thought I was totally destroyed. As Judge Harrison uncapped his gold-plated fountain pen and lowered its sharp nib toward the signature line of the court order, I finally moved. I pushed my heavy wooden chair back. The harsh, loud scrape of the chair legs against the polished marble floor echoed like a thunderclap. Instantly freezing the room, I stood up. My movements were agonizingly slow, deliberate, and entirely devoid of the frantic panic they all expected to see. There were no tears in my eyes. There were no desperate pleas for mercy escaping my lips. I did not even look at my retreating lawyer. I stepped away from the defense table and walked straight past the low swinging wooden gate that separated the legal teams from the gallery. I bypassed the security barriers entirely. My posture shifted instantly. The hunched, broken shoulders of a defeated victim vanished, replaced by a spine made of pure steel. Every step I took toward the center podium carried a heavy, overwhelming weight. The air in the room seemed to drop another 10 degrees. I marched with the cold, absolute authority of an executioner stepping onto the scaffold. The transformation was so jarring, so completely terrifying, that the excited murmurs in the gallery died in their throats. By the time I reached the center of the floor, standing perfectly straight and locking my cold eyes directly onto the judge, a suffocating, dead silence had completely swallowed the courtroom. No one dared to breathe. They were staring at a supposed victim who had just claimed total ownership of the room. I did not even bother reaching for the silver microphone resting on the wooden podium. I bypassed the speaker stand entirely and walked straight toward the court clerk's primary terminal. The clerk, a balding man in a cheap suit, tried to raise his hand in protest, but the sheer, freezing intensity in my eyes pinned him firmly to his chair. I reached into the deep right pocket of my oversized wool coat, my fingers wrapping around the cold, military-grade black encrypted flash drive I had been quietly holding all morning. With a swift, highly practiced motion, I jammed the drive directly into the primary data port of the judicial projection system. It took exactly 3 seconds for the payload to deploy. Every single monitor in the courtroom, from the large overhead evidence displays to the personal laptops of the corrupt journalists sitting in the gallery, instantly flashed a blinding, violent red. The localized internet network of the building was entirely hijacked and completely severed from the outside world. The venture capitalists in the back rows, who had been furiously texting their offshore brokers, suddenly stared in absolute horror as their expensive smartphones displayed the exact same warning. The blinding red screens snapped to a pitch-black background, and a massive, imposing government seal materialized on every display. The seal was accompanied by a stark, glowing text warning that stated the system was now locked down under Level 4 federal encryption protocols. A low electronic hum echoed through the speakers, signaling that all audio and video feeds were now securely routed directly to a classified military server hundreds of miles away. We had achieved total digital supremacy. Judge Harrison gripped the edge of his high wooden bench, his jaw dropping open as his own private judicial terminal went completely dark. I stepped away from the clerk's desk and walked until I was standing directly beneath his elevated platform. I looked straight into his corrupt, arrogant eyes. Slowly, I reached for the lapel of my unbranded, gray coat. I pulled the heavy fabric back, exposing the black tactical harness I wore underneath. Pinned securely to the ballistic nylon was a solid, brushed titanium badge. It was not a standard, shiny police shield. It was the heavily guarded, matte insignia of a shadow agency that most people in Washington did not even know existed. I locked my eyes onto the trembling judge and projected my voice, sharp and cold, making sure it carried into every corner of the dead silent room. Your Honor, I am Special Agent Director Carmen Bishop, Operations Commander of the Department of Tactical Corporate Oversight, and this courtroom is now indefinitely locked down under federal security orders. The letters, DTCO, hit the judge like a physical blow to the chest. The blood drained from Harrison's face so rapidly that his skin turned the color of old, rotting parchment. The gold-plated fountain pen, the exact same pen he was about to use to eagerly sign away my entire life's work, slipped from his trembling fingers. It hit the mahogany desk with a loud, hollow clatter and rolled off the edge, bouncing uselessly onto the floor. He knew exactly who we were. While he thought he was an untouchable king up on his elevated bench, he had completely forgotten the millions of dollars in illegal bribes he had been meticulously funneling through shell companies into secret, numbered bank accounts in Switzerland. He realized in a fraction of a second that the invisible intelligence network hunting down his massive money laundering operation was not just a rumor. The commander of that very agency was standing right in front of him, staring at him like a predator looking at trapped prey. Harrison stumbled backward in his large leather chair, his breathing turning into shallow, terrified gasps. His mind desperately calculated the decades he was about to spend in a maximum security federal penitentiary. He could not form a single coherent word. Vance, however, was entirely clueless. His massive, inflated ego completely blinded him to the severe shift in reality that had just occurred. He slammed his manicured hands onto the plaintiff's table, his face flushing with furious, uncontrollable rage. "What is this absolute nonsense?" Vance screamed, his voice cracking as he pointed a shaking finger directly at my chest. "She is having a psychotic breakdown. This is a pathetic, desperate stunt. Bailiff, grab her. Security, get in here and throw this lunatic out of my courtroom right now." I expected the uniformed court officers standing by the heavy oak doors to rush forward and drag me away in handcuffs. He expected his carefully purchased control to hold firm, but the men standing by the doors did not move toward me. Instead, the 4 armed bailiffs, who had been quietly guarding the perimeter since 9 o'clock this morning, simultaneously stepped forward and locked the heavy deadbolts on the main courtroom doors with a series of loud, metallic clicks. They were never local court security. My tactical team had quietly intercepted and replaced the regular officers before the sun had even come up. In absolute unison, the 4 agents reached beneath their uniform jackets and drew their federal-issue sidearms, holding them in a low, ready position. The sharp, terrifying sound of 4 heavy weapons being drawn echoed through the frozen courtroom. At the exact same moment, 3 men and 2 women sitting in the front row of the gallery, Individuals Vance had arrogantly assumed were just part of his bought and paid for media circus, abruptly stood up. They ripped off their civilian jackets to reveal heavy tactical vests with the letters DTCO emblazoned across their chests in reflective white text. They swiftly moved to secure the center aisles, effectively trapping every single corrupt investor, lawyer, and journalist inside the room. Vance's mouth opened and closed like a dying fish on dry land. His desperate, furious screams for help instantly dissolved into a pathetic, choking silence as the true nightmare finally began. Up on the elevated bench, Judge Harrison desperately scrambled to regain whatever shred of authority he thought he still possessed. His trembling hands gripped the edges of his mahogany desk as he pushed himself up, his eyes darting frantically toward the heavy wooden door leading to his private chambers. He opened his mouth, his voice cracking into a high, pathetic squeak as he tried to project an air of judicial command. "This proceeding is entirely out of order," Harrison stammered, his face dripping with cold sweat. "I am officially declaring an immediate, indefinite recess. This court is adjourned, and I demand to be allowed to return to my chambers at once." I did not even look at him. I simply reached down and struck a single command key on the clerk terminal. Instantly, the massive government seal on every locked screen in the courtroom dissolved. It was replaced by a blindingly clear, high-resolution display of offshore banking statements, wire transfer logs, and deeply encrypted communication transcripts. The room gasped in unison. Right there on the giant overhead screens was a detailed transaction history tracing a series of payments originating from Vance Bishop Corporate Holdings, passing through 3 different shell companies in the Cayman Islands, and landing directly in a hidden trust account registered to Harrison's wife in Geneva. "Your Honor, you are not going anywhere," I said, my voice echoing through the dead, silent room. "Those records show exactly $2,500,000 transferred to your accounts over the past 6 months. But we did not just track the money." I hit another key. An audio file began to play over the courtroom speaker system. The crystal clear, undeniable recording of Harrison and Vance having a private dinner at an exclusive steakhouse filled the air. The recording captured Vance explicitly promising the judge another $1 million in untraceable cryptocurrency the moment the ruling was signed, and Harrison cheerfully agreeing to completely destroy my life for the payout. Hearing his own voice plotting a federal crime, the judge let out a hollow, agonizing groan. His legs gave out, completely. He collapsed back into his oversized leather chair, burying his face in his trembling hands, knowing his career, his freedom, and his entire life were permanently over. He was utterly broken. With the judge neutralized, I slowly turned my back to the bench and walked toward my brother. Vance was standing frozen at the plaintiff table, his expensive Italian suit suddenly looking 2 sizes too big for his rapidly shrinking posture. His chest heaved as he struggled to process the total collapse of his meticulously built empire, but his monumental arrogance refused to let him surrender. He glared at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of terror and desperate rage. "You think you have won," Vance hissed, stepping out from behind his table to face me, trying to look intimidating. "You think your little government badge means anything? You have no idea who I am dealing with. Carmen, the people I am selling Aegis to are infinitely more powerful than your pathetic agency. They have unlimited resources. They are an international syndicate, and when they find out you interfered with their acquisition, they will hunt you down and kill you. You are completely out of your league." I stopped walking when I was exactly 3 feet away from him. I looked at his sweaty, furious face, and I let out a slow, chilling laugh. It was a sound entirely devoid of humor, sharp enough to cut glass. "An international syndicate, Vance?" I asked, tilting my head slightly, watching his eyes dart back and forth. "Are you talking about the highly secretive, ruthless Eastern European cyber cartel? The one you have been negotiating with for the past 90 days? The powerful buyers who promised you $50 million in unmarked offshore bonds?" Vance swallowed hard, a flicker of genuine confusion crossing his face. "How do you know about the bonds?" "I know about the bonds because I personally authorized them," I said, leaning in closer, lowering my voice so only he and the first row of terrified investors could hear the venom in my words. That terrifying foreign cartel does not exist, Vance. It never did. I watched the color drain from his face as the crushing weight of reality began to crash down on him. I did not give him a single second to recover. I began tearing down his grand illusion layer by layer, exposing the absolute magnitude of his foolishness. The anonymous brokers who reached out to you on the encrypted servers? Those were my junior analysts working out of a basement in Virginia, I continued, my words hitting him like physical strikes. The highly secure, untraceable communication network you thought you were using to bypass federal surveillance? I wrote the source code for that network 5 years ago. We monitored every single keystroke you made. We read every single message. Vance shook his head frantically, stumbling backward until his hip hit the heavy wooden table. No, that is impossible. I met the boss. I flew to Dubai exactly 30 days ago. I sat in the penthouse suite of the Burj Al Arab. I drank vintage champagne and shook hands with a man named Victor. He had an entire network of armed guards. I saw his operation with my own eyes. You saw exactly what I wanted you to see, I replied, my voice turning to absolute ice. The penthouse was rented by the federal government. The armed guards were United States Marines operating off the books. And the terrifying Russian crime boss you met? His real name is Special Agent David Miller. He is one of the top undercover operatives I personally trained. You did not outsmart anyone. Vance, you spent the last 3 months negotiating a massive treasonous technology deal entirely with my undercover agents. The syndicate is a ghost. The buyers are a mirage. You walked right into a trap that I built specifically for you. The revelation struck Vance with devastating force. He looked around the locked-down courtroom, looking at the armed tactical agents standing at the doors, looking at the ruined judge sobbing quietly on the bench. He realized he was never a criminal mastermind. He was just a pathetic, greedy rat, running endlessly inside a maze I had designed. His breathing turned into rapid, shallow gasps. His perfectly manicured hands began to shake uncontrollably. He was having a complete psychological breakdown right in front of the entire gallery. But then, something inside him simply snapped. The terror in his eyes morphed into a raw, feral madness. If he was going down, his massive ego dictated that he drag the entire world down into the flames with him. He plunged his hand into the inner pocket of his tailored jacket and whipped out his heavily encrypted smartphone. His thumbs flew across the digital keyboard with manic speed, punching in a highly complex 16-digit alphanumeric passcode. "You think you trapped me?" Vance screamed, spit flying from his lips as his eyes went wild. "I am not going to any federal prison. I built a fail-safe for exactly this kind of disaster. If I cannot have Aegis, nobody gets it. I am initiating the Phoenix Protocol right now." The corrupt journalists and venture capitalists in the gallery erupted into absolute panic. People began screaming, shoving against each other in the locked aisles, trying desperately to get away from him. Judge Harrison let out a pathetic wail and collapsed face down onto his wooden desk in total despair. Everyone in the tech industry knew what a protocol like that meant. It was a digital dead man's switch. "It is done!" Vance roared, hitting the final execute button on his screen and holding the phone high in the air like a twisted trophy. He threw his head back and laughed with pure, unrestrained insanity. The Phoenix Protocol just bypassed all internal security measures. In exactly 60 seconds, the complete, unencrypted source code of the Aegis Quantum Core will be automatically mass uploaded directly to the deep web. Every terrorist, every rogue nation, every hacker on the planet will have it for free. If you arrest me, you get nothing. I just destroyed everything. The gallery was in absolute pandemonium. Reporters were scrambling over the wooden pews, desperately trying to find a signal on their hijacked devices to warn their newsrooms. Venture capitalists were screaming at the armed tactical agents, demanding to be let out of the locked doors, up on the bench. Judge Harrison was still sobbing uncontrollably into his robes. In the center of this hurricane of absolute terror, Vance stood triumphant, his chest heaving, his eyes wide with the manic thrill of a madman who had just burned the world to the ground. But I did not panic. I did not lunge forward to grab the phone from his hands. I did not order my agents to shoot him. Instead, a sound escaped my lips that instantly cut through the screaming gallery. It was a laugh, a slow, chilling, utterly hollow laugh that echoed off the mahogany walls and sent a shiver down the spine of every person in the room. I walked slowly toward him, my boots clicking rhythmically against the polished marble floor. I stopped when I was close enough to feel the frantic heat radiating from his trembling body. I leaned in, my face inches from his, and whispered with a voice entirely devoid of mercy. Did you honestly believe that a quantum algorithm written by my own two hands could ever be used by you to threaten me? Vance stopped laughing. The triumphant fire in his eyes flickered, replaced by a sudden, sickening wave of uncertainty. What did you do? He stammered, his voice dropping to a terrified whisper. I knew you were greedy, Vance, but I also knew you were profoundly stupid, I said, stepping back so the entire room could hear his final destruction. The Phoenix Protocol you just triggered did not upload the Aegis source code to the dark web. The algorithm you stole, the one you have been holding on your servers for the past 6 months, is not a security core at all. It is the most sophisticated, devastating Trojan horse ever engineered by the federal government. Vance looked down at his phone, his thumb hovering uselessly over the screen. By pressing that button and bypassing your own internal security firewalls, you just gave my agency full, unrestricted access to every single server you own, I explained, watching the absolute horror wash over his face. You just transmitted the exact geographical coordinates of every corrupt domestic financial backer who funded your shell companies directly to the Department of Defense. But that is not even the best part. The Trojan horse was also designed to aggressively target the user who initiated the protocol. Vance frantically swiped across his smartphone screen, opening his heavily encrypted offshore banking application. His eyes bulged out of his skull. It took exactly 3 seconds to trace your biometric signature, I continued coldly. And it took another 2 seconds to completely drain every single hidden account registered to your name, your fake corporations, and your offshore trusts. He stared at the glowing screen. The balance, which just moments ago held hundreds of millions of dollars, was plummeting in real time. It dropped to tens of thousands, then hundreds, and finally settled on a perfectly round, devastating zero. The empire he had built on my blood, sweat, and silence was completely incinerated in the blink of an eye. The phone slipped from his slick fingers and shattered against the marble floor. Vance's knees buckled. He collapsed to the ground, curling his body into a tight ball, screaming and sobbing hysterically like a hollow, broken child who had just been violently stripped of his very soul. At that exact moment, the heavy oak doors of the courtroom were kicked open from the outside. The primary tactical intervention unit of the Department of Tactical Corporate Oversight flooded into the room, their heavy combat boots shaking the floorboards. 2 heavily armed agents marched directly up to the judge's bench. They yanked Harrison to his feet, violently slapping heavy steel handcuffs onto his wrists. He was dragged out of his own courtroom, sobbing and pleading, facing federal indictments for high treason and accepting massive corporate bribes. Down on the floor, 2 more agents hauled Vance up by the collars of his ruined bespoke suit. They secured his wrists behind his back. He did not even try to fight them. His eyes were totally vacant, his spirit completely crushed. He was being arrested for severe economic espionage and federal fraud. He was going to spend the rest of his natural life in a maximum security federal penitentiary without any possibility of parole. I turned my back on him for the final time. I adjusted my unbranded gray wool coat and walked straight down the center aisle of the courtroom. The armed guards parted to let me through. I pushed through the heavy wooden doors and stepped out into the grand hallway, leaving the screaming, chaotic nightmare entirely behind me. When I finally pushed open the massive glass doors of the courthouse, the bright, warm Seattle sunlight washed over my face. I took a deep breath of the crisp city air. I had successfully ripped our family empire out of the hands of criminals. I had completely restored my late father's true legacy, transforming his life's work into an impenetrable shield that would protect this nation for generations. They always said blood never stabs you in the back, But they also forgot one crucial rule. In the end, the quietest ghost in the family is always the one who decides everything. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this entire story. Where is everyone tuning in from today? Please let me know down in the comments. I would love to hear from you all. If you found today's story captivating, please remember that YouTube has completely demonetized our channel, meaning we have no budget to operate and will absolutely not upload any new videos here in the near future. We are transitioning our work entirely to Patreon. Please help us keep these amazing stories alive by joining the Maya Revenge Stories Patreon channel. There, you can listen to our absolute best, most exclusive true stories that are significantly longer and far too detailed to publish publicly on YouTube. You can easily join right now by scanning the Patreon QR code displayed on your screen, or by clicking the direct link provided in the description and the pinned comment below. Thank you again for everything, and stay safe.